Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when homework involved goose feathers, fire hazards, and a suspicious amount of chanting. You're seated in a medieval schoolroom, a scriptorium, technically, which is Latin for cold stone room where your fingers go numb before breakfast. And yes, you're doing your homework by candlelight. Not the romantic kind, the waxy, tallow-dripping, smoke-belching kind that leaves soot in your nose and never quite lights the page evenly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious to know where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the flagstones in your woolen socks, which are really just stitched bundles of scratchy yarn barely clinging to your chilled feet. The schoolroom's air is heavy with the scent of melted tallow, old parchment, and damp stone. Outside, it's just before dawn, and the cold has crept into every crevice. Your breath fogs the air as you settle into your assigned spot, third stool from the brazier, behind the boy who keeps picking at the boil on his neck. Your desk is no ergonomic dream. It's a plank nailed to two legs, slanted slightly, riddled with ink stains and the occasional scratch of a dagger tip, left there by students who had less patience than you, or possibly better social lives. The only tool you have for defense is your quill, trimmed earlier from a goose feather and sharpened, not by machine, but with the small blade tucked into your belt. You've already jabbed yourself with it twice. A parchment scroll lies before you, curling at the edges, speckled with older students' smudges. Today's assignment: copy Psalm 38 in Latin, neatly, without error, without, God forbid, blotting the ink. The ink itself is a dark, unforgiving black, boiled from oak galls, iron salts, and wine sediment. It smells vaguely metallic and definitely moldy. You dip your quill carefully into the pot, the viscous liquid clinging like molasses. One wrong flick and it will bleed across the page like a crime scene. This has, in fact, happened to you before. Historians still argue whether medieval inkpots were designed to teach patience or simply to weed out the careless. Your hand shakes as you draw the first ornate letter, a capital D, that must look noble enough to please Brother Antonius, who lurks behind the curtain like a Latin-speaking hawk. Your lines are uneven. The page trembles. You sniffle. The candle sputters. You're not alone in your misery. Around you, other students are bent over their own parchments, eyes watering from the smoke, mouths silently moving as they rehearse their verses. One boy sneezes directly onto his scroll. No one reacts. You all know he'll be copying that again. It's tempting to warm your fingers over the lone brazier in the corner, but last time you did that, Brother Antonius said something about idle hands and hell's furnace. You're not keen to repeat the experience. Instead, you blow on your fingers and continue tracing the long tail of a G. The scratch of quills fills the air, a soft, rhythmic whisper that somehow manages to be both peaceful and oppressive. There's no clock in the room, of course. Time is measured by candles, and this one's burned halfway down already. You suspect the monks keep the windows small on purpose, to prevent you from judging how much daylight remains. It's easier that way, they say. You focus more on your studies and less on the seasons slipping past. Still, through the slit in the stone wall, you glimpse frost feathering across the outside glass. Somewhere far beyond the abbey, people are probably eating warm porridge or sleeping in under heavy wool blankets. But not you. No, you're here, blotting Psalm 38 with your sleeve. A footstep creaks behind you. Brother Antonius. You smell him before you hear him. A hint of beeswax polish and the faint, troubling scent of pickled onions. He glides by, inspecting work, hands folded behind his back like a judge waiting to declare someone guilty of bad margins. He stops behind you. You freeze. The Latin line in front of you reads, Domini, eni in furor tua arguis me. Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger. Fitting. He grunts and moves on. You exhale. It's easy to forget, amid all the gloom, that this education is considered a privilege. Most kids your age never learn to read, or write, or sit still long enough to form the letter E without launching into a tantrum. But here you are, forging your way through the medieval curriculum, which mostly involves copying scripture, memorizing saints' feast days, and learning to write in a script so curly it could double as lace. Oh, and there's a test at the end of the week, a verbal one. You'll be expected to recite 10 psalms from memory. If you pass, you get a fresh quill and a seat closer to the brazier. If you fail, you'll spend Saturday cleaning the privy trenches with a wooden scoop. A luxury system. You stretch your cramped fingers. They crack audibly. Your back hurts. Your candle gutters. Somewhere nearby, a student mutters a curse in Old French. Nobody tattles. You're all in this together. Here's a quirky fact. Some scriptoria trained cats to keep mice away from the vellum scrolls. The cats would patrol the room like furry librarian. One notorious feline, immortalized in the margins of a manuscript, reportedly had a habit of sitting on the very pages he was supposed to protect. The candle burns lower. Your eyelids grow heavier. You make it to the bottom of the scroll just as Brother Antonius calls time. Pens down, scrolls collected, inkpots capped. Your fingers ache, your nose is numb, and your stomach groans like a church bell. But you did it. No smudges. Probably. Tomorrow will be another session of candlelit copying and bone-deep shivering. But for now, you shuffle off to the cloisters with the others, soot in your nostrils and the vague sense that maybe, just maybe, you spelled furor right this time. You're not sure what wakes you first, the tolling of the monastery bell or the breeze blowing straight through the gaps in the shutter. Either way, dawn is breaking, which means your rest is officially over. Not that rest was particularly restful. You spent the night on a straw mattress that smells faintly of old cabbage and has more sharp objects in it than you care to count. Your wool blanket is scratchy and somehow always manages to slide halfway off the bed by midnight, leaving your toes exposed to the morning chill. You groan, quietly. The stone walls are thin, and Brother Ulrich is known to appear whenever a student makes a noise resembling joy or comfort. The bell clangs again. You know the schedule by heart: lauds in 10 minutes, lessons shortly after, and, if you're lucky, a single chunk of coarse bread sometime around midday. Welcome to monastic schooling. Sleep is optional. Grammar is not. You fumble around in the half-dark, pulling on your linen undertunic and the same woolen robe you've worn every day this season. It doesn't quite fit, and the hem is fraying in places, but that's just part of the uniform, threadbare humility. Your boots are stiff with frost. You slip them on anyway, muttering under your breath as you shuffle out into the corridor, lit only by the soft flicker of lanterns hung on iron hooks. The air smells of soot, oil, and boiled turnips. Breakfast prep, probably. Somewhere down the hall, someone is already chanting. You pass a student mumbling a psalm under his breath as he tries to keep pace with your sleepy shuffle. The two of you exchange glazed stares. No words. You're both too tired to invent them. The chapel is cold and echoing, a stone box filled with shadows and sleepy boys. You slide into your place on the bench, kneeling awkwardly as the older students begin the morning chant. The Latin flows around you like fog, melodic and strange. You mumble your parts, half a beat behind, like an exhausted ghost trying to keep up. Gloria Patri, et filio, et spiritui sancto. The chant rises and falls. Your mind drifts. They say this is a school, but it feels more like a quiet military campaign against joy. Still, it's better than the fields, you remind yourself. At least here you have books, or book fragments, or Brother Ulrich's prized wax tablets, which he guards like they're made of gold leaf instead of beeswax. After prayers, you file silently into the lesson hall, a glorified barn with wooden benches and one central lectern from which Ulrich delivers his daily dose of intellectual suffering. The walls are decorated with cracked frescoes of saints pointing judgmentally at sinners, most of whom, you suspect, were simply caught chewing too loudly. Ulrich enters like a storm cloud, trailing the scent of old onions and disdain. Grammar, he says by way of greeting. You groan internally. Grammar again. Latin, of course. Never French. never the local dialect you actually speak, and definitely not anything useful like how to say, "I need to pee" without being sent to confession. He points to you. Decline amicus. Your brain fumbles. Amicus, amici, amico, amicum, amico? You barely breathe. He raises a single arched brow. It hovers like a hawk circling a rabbit. You add, desperately, amici, amicorum, amicis, amicos, amicis. A beat, then a slow nod. You've passed the first test of the day. Barely. This goes on for hours. Conjugation, declension, syntax, repetition. You recite Latin verses so many times you start to hear them in your dreams. Sometimes you mix up the endings and say something mildly blasphemous. Ulrich never laughs, just frowns with his entire body. As the sun climbs, a few rays of light sneak through the stained glass windows, coloring the dusty air in golds and reds. You stare at them longingly. They look warm. Historicus Hodie? Ulrich mutters, dragging a dusty scroll from under his desk. Yes, History Day. Finally, you perk up slightly. There's a chance today's reading won't be entirely about grammatical irregularities. He unrolls the parchment and begins reading, something about Charlemagne's court and a bishop who tried to prove the moon was made of glass. You blink slowly, absorbing the cadence of his voice rather than the meaning of the words. The lesson glides by in a blur of candle smoke, parchment rustling, and occasional snoring. Ulrich handles snores by snapping fingers directly next to your ear. You've learned to nap with one eye open. A real historical fact for you: Charlemagne did in fact issue a capitulary, a royal decree, requiring monasteries to educate boys in reading, singing, and psalmody, even if they weren't training to be monks. It was part of a broader effort to civilize his vast empire through education. You're part of that noble legacy. Try to act like it. There's a break mid-morning, a short one. 10 minutes to stretch your legs or pray. Most students opt to press their hands against the wall where a sunbeam has warmed the stone. It's the closest thing to comfort you'll get today. A boy next to you whispers about sneaking extra bread from the kitchen. Another brags that he saw Brother Ulrich fall asleep during Vespers. You exchange a glance. It's risky to laugh, so you settle for smirking behind your hand. Back in your seat, Ulrich is now droning about verb placement in Latin poetry. Something about dactylic hexameter. Historians still argue whether these patterns were followed strictly or just sort of hoped for by desperate poets. You, however, are mostly focused on whether your stomach is growling loud enough to draw suspicion. When the lunch bell finally rings, a deep, sonorous clang that sounds like mercy itself, you rise so quickly you nearly knock over your stool. Lunch is rustic. A wedge of coarse brown bread, a small ladle of boiled root stew, and a cup of tepid ale, technically allowed because the water here is suspect. You eat fast, too hungry to complain. The stew has a texture you might describe as medievally ambiguous. You choose something that might be turnip. You hope it's turnip. There's no dessert, just more lessons. You trudge back to the hall. Your legs ache. Your brain feels like boiled cabbage. But still, there's something comforting about the routine, the structure, the slow unfurling of knowledge like a scroll being read aloud in a sunlit cloister. You may be tired. You may be freezing. You may occasionally wish you'd been born a duck rather than a schoolboy. But slowly, stubbornly, you're learning. Even if it feels like your brain has to be scraped clean every morning just to make room for the next set of verb endings. Your boots squelch with mud as you walk the narrow track into the village. School, they said. You were told it would make your life better, give you a chance. But as you approach the crooked, timber-framed building that supposedly houses a lesson, you're not sure if it's a school or a cleverly disguised barn. You're not a monk or noble-born or destined for church life. You're a peasant kid, barely 10, and someone, perhaps the priest, perhaps your mother, decided that learning your letters might keep you out of the pigsty and into something resembling a better future. So here you are, clutching a roll of bark with scratch marks, your first notebook, and trying not to cry as a chicken crosses the school's threshold before you do. Inside, it's chaos. The schoolmaster, a wiry man with a permanently raised eyebrow and suspiciously stained robes, is already shouting in Latin, bad Latin, even you can tell. You think he might be drunk, or just tired, or both. Either way, he waves you inside without stopping his sentence, which currently involves the word asinus repeated several times. It means donkey. You get the feeling it's not being used metaphorically. Your desk is a low bench next to the window, which doesn't have glass so much as oiled parchment stretched over the frame. It smells like meat fat and lets through only the faintest suggestion of daylight. Your seatmate is a goat. No, really, a goat. She's tethered to the bench leg, chewing slowly on someone's old lesson scroll. You wonder if that still counts as plagiarism. Your first lesson of the day? The alphabet. Not in your own tongue, of course. Why make things easy? You start with Latin. BC, or rather a, B, C, as Master Alric insists. He has a long stick that thwacks anything it pleases. He once smacked a table for wobbling. You've learned not to move unless instructed. Around you, the other students range in age from 7 to 15. A few look like they're pushing 20. There are no tidy school uniforms, no neat rows of chairs, just a cluster of patched tunics, lice-infested hair, and faces smeared with soot and yesterday's stew. Someone is crying softly in the corner. You try not to look. Your lesson is dictated by Master Alric's mood and the availability of chalk. Today, there's some, so he scratches letters onto a slate board while muttering oaths under his breath. You copy them onto your bark sheet using a charred stick. The lines wobble, but it's your first time, so you try to be proud of them. A proper historical note here. Village schools in the Middle Ages were rare, informal, and usually set up by local clergy or, occasionally, wealthy landowners who needed someone to help with ledgers. Curriculum? That depended entirely on who ran the place. Some taught only psalms. Others threw in a bit of arithmetic. A few just made kids copy moral stories while they went out for lunch. Quirky tidbit. One surviving 14th century complaint from a village teacher mentions children bringing squirrels to class and setting them loose to distract the master. You eye the goat and wonder how that story ended. The window parchment rattles as a breeze pushes through. The classroom smells faintly of damp hay, animal breath, and boiled parsnips. You're not sure which scent is strongest, but it makes concentrating difficult. Master Alric continues to drone on about vowels, then launches abruptly into arithmetic. 3 pennies paid for an egg. For eggs make a hen. A hen costs 6 farthings. So what does that mean about your mother's dowry? You blink. That escalated fast. A boy raises his hand. Sir, what's a farthing? A pause. A slow thwack on the table with the stick. That's a question you ask when you've earned shoes, Alric replies. The boy lowers his hand. You manage to scratch out a few sums. They're wrong, probably, but Master Alric seems distracted arguing with the goat. You take that as a win. The day continues in this fashion. Uneven, confusing, and with frequent interruptions. A girl throws up outside. Someone's baby sibling toddles into the room, wails, and is carried off again. The ceiling leaks. A bee buzzes in, does a lap of the room, and escapes through a crack in the beams. You start to think this is all completely pointless, until Master Alric uncorks a clay jar and passes it around. Ink. Real ink. He lets each of you dip a twig into it and write your name, or attempt to, on a strip of linen. Your fingers shake with excitement. This feels serious, official, almost magical. You scrawl out the letters slowly, trying to remember the shapes. Oh, maybe it's your name. Maybe it's someone else's. Either way, it's yours now. The afternoon lesson is moral instruction. A simplified tale of a saint who didn't complain while being eaten by wolves. The moral, apparently, is obedience. You glance down at your blistered fingers and decide that if wolves ever show up here, you're not volunteering. Historians still argue whether village education was truly widespread or more anecdotal. Records are sparse, and much of what we know comes from later periods that may have romanticized things. What's clear, though, is that for kids like you, school was a rare and confusing detour from survival. The sun begins to set. Light fades from the parchment window. Master Alric stops mid-sentence, rubs his eyes, and declares that the day is done. No one dares cheer. You shuffle outside with the others, ears ringing from the quiet, head aching with effort. You walk home through muddy lanes, past chickens settling into coops, and the occasional old woman muttering at her vegetables. Smoke curls from chimneys. Somewhere, a lute plays. You think it might be your brother or a neighbor or a figment of your imagination. It hardly matters. You reach home. Your mother eyes your bark scroll and sighs. Well, you didn't die. Good enough. You curl up in your straw bed, the scent of soot and dried onions clinging to your tunic. The day's lessons rattle around in your brain like loose pebbles. You close your eyes, exhausted and proud. You didn't understand half of what was said. You might have spelled your name wrong, but you learned something. Tomorrow you'll return. Maybe the goat will too. The quill trembles in your hand like it knows what's coming. You stare down at the sheet of parchment, heart thudding, sweat gathering under your wool collar despite the bitter chill of the scriptorium. This is it, your first real assignment. Not scripture, not your name. A royal decree, and you have to copy it, neatly, perfectly, without mistakes, or blots, or smudges, or accidentally suggesting the king likes sheep more than tax. Again, you breathe slowly. Inhale the scent of ink, vellum, and beeswax. Exhale fear. Maybe if you concentrate, the quill won't betray you. You give it a little test stroke, too wet. You blot the excess on a scrap of cloth and begin. The first word is Rex, king. Easy enough. You've drawn that are 1,000 times in practice. You flick the quill confidently and bladder. A single drop of ink lands squarely in the blank margin. Sits there judging you. You freeze, heart pounding, eyes darting toward Brother Gerard, who's hunched in the corner like a suspiciously quiet spider. He's sharpening a quill with a knife so slowly, so deliberately, that it feels like a threat. You slide a sheet of blotting wool over the page. Too late, the mark has seeped. It looks like a bug exploded. You try not to cry. The worst part? The decree isn't even interesting. Something about grain tariffs and coastal trade permissions. But in the mind of a medieval copyist, every letter mattered. And this one, this smudge, could be interpreted as an E, which changes the word from portus, harbor, to porcus, pig. One official misread, and suddenly the king is granting pigs exclusive docking rights in Cornwall. And yes, that exact kind of mistake has happened before. One poor scribe once accidentally rendered Dominus Navium, master of ships, as Dominus Navium Swarum, which turned the proud admiral into lord of his own little boats. His career never recovered. You begin again. Rex Angli Franci et Dominus Hiberni. The ink glides more smoothly now. You focus hard, tongue poking slightly from your mouth, like it's helping guide the quill. The work is slow, tedious, painstaking. You dip the quill every few words, resharpen the point every few lines, blot, breathe, and keep going. The candle flickers with every movement, casting shadows that twitch across your page like restless ghosts. Brother Gerard walks by, pausing behind you. You can hear him sniff, literally sniff. You suspect he can smell errors. Your descenders, he murmurs, and taps the page with one long, bony finger. Too shallow. They'll think you're writing urina instead of Anna, right? Urine instead of urn. That would go over well. He moves on. You exhale. Again. The cold is settling in deep now. Your toes are numb. Your fingers have locked into the shape of a claw. You long to stretch, to stand, to scream, but you've seen what happens to those who stretch during copy duty. A boy last week tried it. He's still limping from the punishment run around the cloister. You keep going. Copying these documents is considered a sacred task. You are a servant of knowledge, a protector of truth, and also someone who could be whipped for turning Hosp's guest into Hosti's enemy. That's a common one, by the way. Just a tiny blot of ink between friends. Another scribe nearby coughs violently. Brother Gerard glances up. Not on the parchment, Bernard. No, brother. That's not vellum. That's a week's wages. I know, brother. A long pause. You'll clean it. Yes, brother. And still you copy. Your back aches like it's made of chalk. Your neck feels like it was twisted into this posture by a particularly cruel gargoyle. The room reeks of ink and despair. But then something magical happened. You finish the page. You sit back, slowly, carefully, like you're afraid to move too quickly and ruin it. The Latin flows neatly across the parchment. You even manage to decorate the capital Q with a curled tail that looks almost intentional. You half expect the angels to sing. They don't, but you do get a small grunt of approval from Gerard as he collects the page with gloved fingers. Then he hands you another blank sheet. You stare at it. You blink. You seriously consider quitting education forever and becoming a traveling spoon seller. And yet, you dip the quill again, because you're learning. You've picked up little tricks now, holding your breath during long strokes to steady your hand, warming the ink slightly for better flow, using the side of the feather to brush away dust. Tiny victories. They help. Fun fact, some scribes would include tiny illustrations in the margins. Cats chasing mice, monks drinking wine, even snails jousting with knights. Not always allowed, but tolerated if subtle. A medieval version of doodling in the margin. You try to imagine what doodle you'd draw if you dared. A chicken wearing a crown? A goat graduating from university? Brother Gerard would not approve. You continue into the afternoon, and somewhere between one parchment and the next, your brain starts doing that thing it does when tired, mixing Latin with your local dialect, imagining letters dancing, hearing phantom choir music that isn't playing. You suspect you may be delirious. Historians still argue whether the monotony of monastic copying was a path to meditation or madness. Judging by how you just imagined your quill apologizing to you, you're leaning toward madness. But the day ends eventually. It always does. You stretch your fingers, now stained with ink and trembling slightly. You carry your pages to the shelf and lay them out to dry under Waitstone. You blow gently on the last one, careful not to spit. As you pack up your tools, Gerard stops you. No blotting today, he mutters. Your best work. You feel a flicker of pride. Dangerous, probably, but warm. He adds after a pause, you might be a proper scribe yet, if you live long enough. Comforting. You leave the scriptorium in a daze. Your legs are jelly. Your eyes ache. The air outside feels like spring compared to the ink-choked chill you've left behind. Somewhere, someone is baking bread. You breathe deep. One day, perhaps, you'll copy something important. A map, prayer book, a love letter, or maybe just a better version of this royal decree, one that doesn't make it sound like the pigs are staging a coup. But for now, you've survived another day with your quill, your ink, and your increasingly suspicious joints. The fire crackles in the hearth, but the warmth doesn't quite reach your corner of the room. Your embroidery hoop is balanced delicately in your lap, a tapestry of careful stitches slowly forming the shape of a lamb nestled in a vine. Symbolic, apparently. Everything must be symbolic when you're a noble girl, especially your free time, which is not actually free. You slide the needle through the linen again, pretending not to glance at the parchment hidden under your cushion. It's thin and crinkled, the ink fading, but you've read it so many times you could recite the passage by heart. Aristotle, translated badly, smuggled by your cousin from her tutor, and absolutely not for your eyes. Your fingers move in time with the pattern. In out-pull tie, a lovely border if you say so yourself, except you're not paying attention to the pattern. Your mind is running through philosophical metaphors about virtue and potentiality, words you only barely understand but crave like honey in winter. Girls, after all, aren't supposed to read much beyond prayers or etiquette guides. Writing is fine as long as it's recipes or marriage contracts, but real learning, that's not for you. Your brother gets to learn Latin and debate logic with Master Roland. You get a sewing needle, a posture lesson, and stern warnings about womanly modesty. Still, you find ways. During lessons in comportment, how to greet a duchess versus a countess, it's all in the curtsy depth. You listen politely, nod when required, and then return to the fireplace with a book hidden in the folds of your gown. You've tucked bits of parchment into needlework cases, slipped loose leaves between pages of the family psalter, and memorized quotes under the pretense of composing thank you letters. You're not the only one. Elise, the chambermaid with a lisp and a laugh like birdsong, knows what you're doing. She's covered for you more than once, smuggling in scraps of parchment from the stable boy who can read a little French, and might one day spell his own name without mixing up the vowels. She once brought you a fragment of a story from far-off lands, a tale of a queen who rode into battle with scrolls of law strapped to her saddle. Probably fiction, but still. Don't tell, you whispered. She winked. Who would believe me? In the sitting room, your tutor Lady Bridget drones on about the virtues of silence. A proper woman speaks little, listens always, and never corrects her betters. You wonder how she defines betters. You stitch a little faster. Bridget moves on to herbal remedies for headaches. Chamomile, she says, is good for calming a restless mind. You privately suspect you'll need a bucket of it by nightfall. A real historical truth? Most girls, even noble ones, didn't receive formal education during much of the medieval period. Some learned to read at a basic level, especially if destined for a convent, but rarely received the same philosophical or grammatical training as boys. Literacy was gendered, and often viewed as dangerous when it wandered beyond religious instruction. That's why what you're doing feels thrilling and risky. You remember last week's incident. You left your secret parchment, some nonsense about natural philosophy, on the windowsill. Your brother found it and took it straight to your father. There was shouting, words like inappropriate, scandalous, and unnatural ambition. You spent the evening with your hands blistered from scrubbing rush mat. Bridget claimed it was a lesson in humility. You think she enjoyed it. Still, your father didn't take the parchment away. He left it in your chamber, folded, creased, but intact. Historians still argue whether women like you ever truly broke through the barriers of education in the Middle Ages, or whether your stories were simply erased. Some cite figures like Hildegard of Bingen or Christine de Pizan, learned women who wrote extensively. Others believe they were exceptions made memorable by rarity. But you dream of being more than an exception. You dream of ink on your fingers and words you understand. You excuse yourself from needlework and step out into the corridor. It's quiet. A tapestry flutters slightly from a draft near the stairwell. You tiptoe past the guardroom and into the library, or what passes for one. A single chamber lined with locked cabinets and a small writing desk. You have one key. It opens the smallest drawer, where your uncle's old psalters are stored. But behind them, you've hidden a few other texts. A bestiary, a half-translated fragment of Boethius, a page torn from a book of Roman histories. You light a taper, just for a moment, just to see the words. They swim before your eyes like secrets waiting to be claimed. You settle onto the stool. The leather creaks. The candle flickers. You read in silence, fingers trailing the Latin as your lips form the words. Omnia mutantur nihil interit. Everything changes, but nothing is truly lost. You almost smile. Fun detail. Some medieval noblewomen commissioned their own books, often books of hours, lavishly illustrated with gold leaf, tiny saints, and personalized prayers. One such book includes a marginal note in a girl's hand, scrawled between verses, "So boring, my fingers hurt." A universal sentiment, it seems. The taper burns low. Your knees ache from sitting too long. You blow out the flame, gently return the book, and slip back into the corridor. The needlepoint will still be waiting for you. Lady Bridget will be mid-sentence. No one will notice the glow on your cheeks, but something is changing. You are learning, quietly, illegally, brilliantly, and tonight, when you lie in your soft feather bed beneath the carved beams and linen curtains, you won't dream of marriage alliances or dowries. You'll dream of scrolls and quills and strange, beautiful words that are slowly becoming your own. You'll dream of knowing enough Latin to correct your brother. The entire village has turned up to watch you humiliate yourself. You kneel on the splintered wooden floor in the chapel-turned schoolroom, a rough wool cloak bunched awkwardly beneath your knees. The fire's gone out. Your stomach is churning. And directly ahead of you, Master Godfrey is perched on a tall stool, scowling down like a cat who smells you've stepped out of line but hasn't quite caught you in the act yet. It's exam day. Technically, it's called a recitation, but don't let the name fool you. This is no sleepy oral quiz. This is public academic combat. And you, unfortunate child that you are about to attempt to conjugate Latin verbs in front of your peers, your teachers, your cousin, and even your baker who wandered in because he heard someone might faint. You adjust your tunic, clear your throat, and immediately regret both actions. Amare, Godfrey intones, to love, conjugate it, present tense. You nod like you expected that. You did not. Amo, amas, amat, amamus, amatis, amant. You murmur, voice shaking. A silence. He leans forward. Louder. You repeat it. Louder this time, each word echoing in the cold hall. You finish on amant and dare to glance up. No one is smiling, except the butcher's son, who is already out of school and loves to watch people squirm. Past imperfect, Godfrey snaps. Your brain whirs. You try to remember what Brother Ulrich said. Something about sheep and sorrow? Amabam, amabas, amabat. You trail off. Your tongue freezes. Amabamus, amabatus, amabant? Question mark, he says sharply. Are you asking me? No, master, you mutter. A fly lands on your nose. You ignore it. You are a statue now. A sweating, stuttering statue of linguistic failure. Around you, other students kneel in various poses of dread. You hear someone whispering prayers behind their sleeve. Not for spiritual comfort, for divine grammatical intervention. This is the worst test you've ever taken. Not because it's hard, though it is, but because of the format. Medieval exams are performative. There's no parchment, no ink, no written questions. Just you, your memory, and the cold, expectant eyes of an audience ready to watch your intellectual collapse. They say it prepares you for adulthood. They are wrong. The next boy steps up. His knees crack loudly as he kneels. He's asked to recite a passage from Augustine. He gets 4 words in before calling the bishop a swollen bread man. It's supposed to be bread of heaven. Everyone winces. He is dismissed with a tut and a dismissive wave. Your turn isn't over yet. Of course not. Godfrey points to a scroll. Translate line 4. You read the Latin silently. Virtus in medio stat. Easy enough. You say, virtue stands in the middle. He nods. Then, and what does that mean? You pause. Moderation is good, you offer. He squints. That's a modern interpretation. Moderation is mediocre? You try again. Someone in the back snorts. Godfrey does not smile. Sit down, he says flatly. You shuffle off to your bench, heart hammering, cheeks flaming, certain you've just failed yourself, your family, and probably Latin itself. You try not to make eye contact with anyone, especially the boy who passed earlier and is now preening like a peacock in a hair shirt. Still, you're not alone in your shame. A girl from the manor house attempts to recite a proverb and instead delivers something about a donkey drinking moonlight. No one's sure what she meant. Everyone claps politely anyway. One by one, the students pass or fail. Success earns you a smile, maybe even a nod from the priest. Failure earns silence, and worse, advice. Brother Ulrich pulls you aside. You study well, but you fear too much. You nod. Of course you fear. The entire system is built to keep you guessing, shivering, second-guessing every Latin vowel like it might explode if mispronounced. Still, there's something comforting in the madness. It means you care. It means you're learning, slowly, painfully. Historical fact. Exams in medieval schools were indeed public and oral. The idea was to build memory, eloquence, and humility. There were no multiple-choice questions, just immediate correction, shame, or praise. And the quirky bit? In some universities, Failing badly enough required you to host a feast for your classmates. One poor soul in 14th century Paris was so bad at reciting Aristotle that his family had to provide a whole ox for roasting. Imagine flunking your way into bankruptcy. Later that afternoon, the results are posted, or rather whispered. No marks, no grades, just rumors and nods. You are adequate, not praised, not shamed, somewhere in the middle. You wonder if that's where virtue actually stands. Evening brings candlelight and bowls of lentil stew. The air is thick with soot and the smell of slightly burned bread. You sit near the hearth, too exhausted to eat quickly. Around you, the others slump, muttering about what they got right, what they flubbed, and whether anyone noticed the hiccup during the psalm recitation. You listen quietly, spoon scraping your bowl. Your nerves have dulled now, replaced with a strange warmth. Relief, maybe. You survived. Again. Outside, the sky turns deep blue. The stars blink down, impassive and eternal. You lie in your bed that night and replay every mistake, every stumble, every misplaced vowel. And somehow you smile, because even in all that awkward failure, you learned something. And not just about verbs. You learned that language is slippery, that learning is messy, that it's okay to be embarrassed as long as you try again. You whisper conjugations into the darkness until sleep pulls them from your lips. Amabam, amabas, amabat. The sky is bruised with morning. A soft blue-gray, threaded with charcoal clouds, and already your hands are cold. Again, you can barely see them in the pre-dawn light, but they're there, curled around the edge of a splintering wooden cart, fingers numb from hours of script practice and rope burn from carrying too many bundles of firewood yesterday. Because today isn't about Latin verbs or grain tariffs. Today is punishment, and not the scary dungeon kind, no. This is something subtler, purer, a spiritual discipline, they call it. A lesson in obedience and endurance, which, in practice, means hauling bundles of parchment, stoking fires, and helping clean the chamber pots of the upper dormitory. All before breakfast, you shuffle alongside two other students, equally silent, equally guilty. One tried to sneak a love poem into the grammar book. The other fell asleep during matin. Your sin? You used the word donkey in a metaphor during an oral translation. It was apparently inappropriate. You didn't even mean it that way. So here you are, sweeping ash from a stone floor in the kitchen undercroft while the cooks pretend not to laugh at your efforts. You stir the ashes slowly, carefully, trying not to gag on the scent of burnt leek soup and meat drippings. The room is warm, at least, a contrast to the bitter halls upstairs. Your sleeves are rolled, your expression neutral. This is your penance. The cook, a woman with arms like tree trunks and an apron crusted with flour, offers you a half loaf of hard rye. You nod your thanks. She's not supposed to feed you, but mercy leaks through the cracks sometimes. As you chew the bread, harder than Latin declension, your thoughts drift. Why do you keep doing this? Why study? Why wake before dawn? Fumble with frozen ink? Suffer under the sharp tongue of teachers who correct more than they praise? Because something is happening. Quietly, patiently, you are becoming educated. Not the proud, powdered kind with gold-trimmed robes and courtly titles, but something older, something deeper. You're being stitched into a tradition that stretches across centuries. Student to student, scribe to scribe, monk to monk. You're joining the long, ink-stained line of those who endured the boredom, the repetition, the punishments, and came out knowing just a little more. And boredom is part of it. Yes, medieval schooling was often dull, painfully so, but within the tedium was a hidden wisdom. Every repetition etched knowledge into your bones. Every copied line taught you patience. Every long sermon taught you how to listen through the fog of fatigue. A genuine historical fact, students in the 13th century often used wax tablets for daily lessons, writing and erasing again and again. Reuse wasn't just thrift, it was pedagogy. Learning didn't come from novelty, came from endurance. You returned to your dormitory by late morning. The schoolmaster glances at your ash-smudged sleeves and says nothing, That's a kind of forgiveness. You scrub your hands in icy water and return to your studies. Today's subject, riddles. Not a joke, real riddles. Medieval pedagogy sometimes included riddles as a way to sharpen reasoning and language skills. They were riddled with allegory, of course, but occasionally veered into the bizarre. Here's one you're given. I have a house but no door. I hide treasures but no key will turn. I am a trap and a gift alike. What am I? You furrow your brow. A puzzle? This is new. You murmur the riddle aloud, tracing each word. Is it a book? Yes, a book. Your first instinct is correct. The schoolmaster nods. No smile, but a slight softening of the eyes. That's practically a standing ovation around here. Quirky tidbit? One preserved Anglo-Saxon school riddle describes a writing desk as a beast that eats the mind, while another likens a grammar book to a silent judge who punishes slowly. Accurate. You copy the riddle into your practice scroll, decorating the first letter with a curled tail. The ink blots slightly. You allow it. Let future students suffer, too. By midday, the school bell rings again. You stretch your fingers, tight from quill work. Your back aches, your legs are stiff, and your eyes feel gritty from reading by candlelight. But you know more now than you did yesterday, even if the knowledge is buried under a pile of laundry, lectures, and smudged Latin. And so the day winds on. You read, you repeat, you recite. By the time you're sent to the chapel for evening prayers, your head feels like a beehive, full, buzzing, strangely productive. As the sun sets through the cracked stained glass, casting long amber bars across the stone floor, you kneel again, not in shame, but in habit. The candlelight dances across the hymn book as you murmur along with the others. Gloria tibi, Domini. There's a rhythm to this now, a strange, painful grace. You walk back to your dormitory by torchlight, boots thudding softly on the floor. You pass the goat. She's still here. You nod at her. She chews serenely. Your bunk waits, straw-filled, rough, a bit smelly, but yours. You curl under your blanket, tuck your ink-stained fingers beneath your chin, and exhale. You're tired, so tired. But in the tiredness, there's something else, a flicker of pride, a small ember. You made it through another day. You studied, you served, you survived, and slowly you're transforming. You're becoming a person who thinks in two languages, a person who notices the beauty in a well-formed letter, a person who knows that boredom isn't the enemy, it's the passageway. And as the wind whistles outside and the shutters rattle gently, you begin to drift. Let your breath slow, your body heavy now, nestled under blankets, warmed by imagined candlelight and the ghostly scent of ink and beeswax. You release the weight of the day. You don't need to remember every conjugation. You don't need to carry every scroll, recite every psalm. Let them slip from your shoulders like an old wool cloak. You've done enough. Imagine the classroom emptied, its wooden benches polished by use, the quills set gently aside in their clay pots, the scrolls rolled and tied with soft linen ribbon. The fire in the hearth flickers low, casting golden shadows on the stone. In that stillness, the knowledge lingers, settles around you like a shawl, quiet, deep, lasting. Outside, the monastery bells toll softly, not to summon or scold, but to mark the closing of the day. The goats have gone to sleep. The ink has dried. The lessons are over. You've studied with monks, toiled beside peasants, dreamed beneath noble rafters. You've heard the scratch of quills, the droning of psalms, the strange laughter of riddles in forgotten languages. And now there's nothing left to do. Let your eyes drift shut. Let the whispers of the past blur into dream. Sleep now, deep and unhurried, as steady and sacred as parchment. You've earned it.